So, where do you think creative energy comes from?
Well, most people see the universe as something taking place somewhere. And I see it as nothing taking place everywhere.
That's going to take me a minute to figure out. That's a great answer.
No, you know, when I was a little kid, I had a experience. You know, I was 5 years old. I was in my mother's kitchen. Hadn't started school yet. Hadn't done any socializing outside of the family and my own backyard and everything. And because I lived in the country, a lot of my associates at a very young age were birds and animals and things that were around that part of the country. Pheasants, woodcocks in the spring, and you could hear the animals outside in the forest. And my mother gave me a record, played a record for me as a kid called Peter and the Wolf by Tchaikovsky. And that further fired my imagination as to, you know, the existence of beings in their own world, right? It's like when you'd walk out in the meadow. I wasn't allowed to walk out, you know. I wasn't allowed to go past a certain point at 5 years old. In fact, I did go to the brook one day. We had the brook. And I went to the brook and I got wailed upon, you know. Being the parents in the 40s, they believed in, you know, spare the rod and spoil the child. And so I've always felt like pushing the boundaries, whatever they were, you know. If I was told not to do something, there was all the more reason to do it. And but the fact that I lived in the country, and I remember being approached by animals as a little kid. You know, I'd be out in like a playpen in the yard. My mother would be in the house, and she'd be maybe playing a little bit of piano. She played Chopin, and she was, you know, her firstborn child was just 2 or 3 years old. And I remember birds landing on the edge of the playpen, you know. And of course, I probably scared them away immediately, but you know, I understood that creatures, beings are curious, and that kind of made me curious, you know. So the vastness of this world that unfolded to me had sounds in it, you know. And then later on, when Dave Grisman and I were deciding we were going to be John Coltrane and Bird, picked up the saxophones, you know. It was halfway crazy, but the other half was absolutely right. It was like, you have to explore these things. And we used to go outside because, you know, Eric Dolphy said that music is everywhere. It's everywhere. And so as budding saxophone jazz players, free jazz players in the 60s, we would go out in those same woods, you know, and try and interact with nature with saxophones. And we did, you know. Experiences are fleeting, and music allows time to stop. Music takes our mental time and gives it a shape and a tempo. And it allows us to exist in it as a listener, also as a player, most often as a player, because that's what we all do, is a sort of community of people who respond to sounds. And the sounds, you know, they only have a duration. They're not permanent. but where the sounds take place, who can say what the duration of space is?
It's true.
You know?
It's true.
So,
I guess.
So we remember sounds and we imagine sounds to go on, you know, and we like to tap into that. You know, we feel there's a moral good to music, I think. And then there's, you know, just the other side of it, which is just another gig, you know. But after a while, man, how many years are you going to haul your stuff around and have just another gig, you know? Sometimes it's interesting to look into it a little bit.
Yes, it is. So when you're writing something or you're playing something, and you've got a good flow going through you've got the muse going, and it's good, how does it make you feel?
Blessed. Blessed. I mean, I imagine that the mind of inspiration is no different than our perceptions and our minds. It's just that if we start to recognize this non-linear place and kind of learn to dwell with it, you know, it's very interesting. So when songs sort of come by themselves, you know, I'm sure that because we've cultivated resting in that inner light, that place that illuminates, that just the contents of our mind will be shaped. You know, it doesn't always happen, but I mean the contents of our mind being somewhat chaotic, you know, this inner light, this inspiring light shines through. I mean, I think every time we touch an instrument, we're trying to connect with that, you know, because it's, I think about music sometimes, it's completely non-linear, and then we create a shape and a form out of it. But music, you know, it's not like talking, it's, you know, a little bit like dancing, it's like poetry, it's like all that stuff, but it's its own strange thing. The sounds cut through, you know, and I think that when it's flowing, it's just that maybe we put aside some preoccupation of our mind and let the flow happen. And sometimes we'll write it down, sometimes we'll look at a piece of paper a year later and go, oh yeah, I know how that goes. You already know the rest of the song. Like in bluegrass music, you know, it's such a narrow focus to try to follow in the actual lineage of like Carter Stanley and Bill Monroe. Although Bill's melodies, when you get down, there's 4 or 5 really, really distinct melodies, and then Lester Flatt seems to have been a writer too, contributed to all those early songs they did. Or he maybe wrote them and Bill just kind of helped him along, put it into a shape. But it's interesting to write in a narrow focus. You know, I mean, think about the blues. I mean, really, there's only one melody to the blues, you know. But of course you can, you know, you make variations and everything, but in the bluegrass thing you got these elements, these, well, shapes to work with. And then you can, of course, you space out and go beyond it all, but it's so interesting to go back into a melodic tradition like Carter Stanley. He basically writes this same melody that in different ways all the time. You know, I think it's incredible.
It's kind of like everybody has their own song, and they just kind of like, you know, sing it a few different ways sometimes.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of sort of new age stuff now about finding your voice and stuff like that. I believe in that. It's important for people to find their voices. And you know, in the ancient Indian continent of India, the Vedas, all those ancient texts talk about sound being, you know, this primal vibration. In the Bible, you know, Book of John, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You know, I mean, it's imponderable in a way, but yet, because it is, it opens your mind, you know.
Yeah, the cosmos being a word or music itself.
Yeah, vibration.
The vibration.
You know. But the music's been always recognized. Pythagoras, you know. I read something beautiful last night from Tim O'Brien's library. It said Plato, he said something about those who love music will, you know, seek and give affection. But, you know, it's amorous.
That's really nice. It's true. It seems like it.
Yeah, well, think it's also not only the tales tall and true of the exploits of musicians and their incredible appetites and short-lived lives, even living somehow at the capacity of their own personal vibration. You know, I'm a big fan of Buddy Holly, and since the web now has all this information, I've gone on and looked very carefully at how it's still a mystery, and I'd like to know more about it. I'd like to talk to the crickets. They're still alive. But you look at Buddy Holly and look at his expressions, and first of all, he's very young. Everybody in the band almost has the same sort of funny little haircuts and he's all enthusiasm, you know, completely just giving, just totally in love. And then there's something happened that I don't know what happened between the management and the production and the whole thing, and Buddy wanted to be his own man. And you see the photos and film clips as a slightly disillusioned look, yet he's still holding his head high. And then the last pictures that were taken at the last show, he's had some corrective surgery done. I think his teeth, maybe his eyes, you know. And he's being groomed for the Elvis track. And he did that tour because he owed the management. That tour would get him out of all his commitments that were going to hold him back to be what he wanted to be. And everybody thinks he wanted to be Buddy Holly, but I'm not sure. I think he might have wanted to be somebody else, and that's all she wrote. You know, Bob Dylan talks about transfiguration, like maybe somebody's karma is mixed up with your karma, and something happens to them that doesn't happen to you, but it still affects you. You'll have Dylan speaks about a motorcycle accident that had happened to somebody in the Hells Angels some years before he had his accident, and the guy's name was Bob Zimmerman, and he was killed in a motorcycle wreck. So Dylan, at the height of his career, making choices that were, who knows what choices he was making, had a motorcycle accident and really hurt himself and was laid up in the hospital for a while. And then later on he found out about this other person. So it's an old idea. It's the idea of this kind of like a scapegoat. It's not a personal thing. It's transpersonal. And he calls it transfiguration. And I think but Buddy Holly, he was trying to transfigure himself into a different character. And I just think that I don't say the order of the universe, but I think that messes with your destiny. Well, getting on airplanes messes with your destiny. You know what I mean? We take our life in our hands every time we travel. We don't know what's out there for us. So somehow we have to be true to ourselves, you know? And I'm going to be true to Buddy Holly's self, you know, because I want to finish out something for him, if that makes any sense. I feel it like, you know, his energy was so beautiful. Yet he too got caught up in the music business, and yet you look at those photos and you know you see the integrity there. But he was going to make a leap, and recklessly, they decided that they got to fly to that next gig. They could have canceled that next gig. what changed me was I was on the road with C-Train, and we had to get from western Massachusetts down to New Jersey in a few short hours to play a second show after doing a matinee at a college. And they put us on a mail plane. And the mail plane flew without radar. It had no flight plan. It was just a mail plane. And it flew down the Hudson River Valley from western Massachusetts. And as it came in towards New Jersey, it was going to land at some hard, very near or on the Newark airfield. But you know, pilots, it's like bush pilot. So here we are, the whole band, we're in this little Piper Club flying down like below the radar in the Hudson River Valley. And now he's going to land, so he comes up out of that valley, and we're facing a 747 coming right at us. Right? So this pilot, he did one of these big turns where he goes upside down and spins off to the side, and that jet went over us, and I saw it. I mean, 20 feet away? That's a big plane, 747. And other people in the band weren't upset by that. I was shaken to my core. I went to the cigarette machine, bought a pack of Lucky Strikes, and just started chain smoking. But for me, I took that as a sign, you know. I'm not really that superstitious, but that was evidence that our lives were at stake for the sake of the music business. And I began to make other plans. I started visiting Tibetan meditation centers and said, there's got to be another way, you know. Just to grind it out on the road, you know. And, you know, the management wasn't in that plane. We were, you know. And I remember one of the band guys, one of the leaders saying, come on, man, don't be so dramatic. It's not... And yeah, well, he's right, but that was one of those moments, you know. That, you know, I felt I was going to be cut short if I didn't change my orientation.
And we almost died. Don't be so dramatic about it.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Yeah. Because you make other people nervous when you get... They were relying on me, too. They wanted me to kind of like, you know... What do you call it?
Put on a calm...
Man up.
Right, yeah.
Man up. No problem, boys. Have a great show tonight.
Right. What are your thoughts on what do you think the connection is between dreaming and creativity? Do you think they're parts of the same thing or different mechanisms? Or
I just think creativity is just our little glimpse of a much bigger picture. You know, a song is a small thing. It's that when you put some breath with it, it's big and it's expansive, but really it's just a tiny little page, or you know, we only see glimpses of it's a much bigger picture, I think. You know, and I know there are a lot of people who really dream a lot, you know, and they learn how to work with their dreams. I don't seem to dream a lot, but when I dream, it's pretty clear, very lucid kind of dream. But and I can kind of get into it in the dream, you know what I mean? Like enter that dream world. But I'm just a beginner in that kind of thing. But I think the more you meditate, the more vivid the dreams become.
Do you ever find yourself doing some things? Like I tend to have like two kind of motifs when I do become lucid in my dream. Either I'm trying to like find the prettiest girl around and visit with her, or I'm trying to like find somebody to like ask them something spiritual or something like that.
Isn't that interesting? You're dreaming that you want to ask somebody something, and you don't know what it is. You know, Bob Dylan again, he's got a song about the Titanic. And he goes on, he says, the verses go on and on about like this chaos happening. The ship is sliding down, all the furniture is falling, the band is playing, and people are trying to grab seats and falling off. I mean, it's in total chaos, and there's this little chorus or refrain. It goes, and the watchman, he lay sleeping. He dreamed the Titanic was sinking. He wanted to tell someone. Wild.
The watchman dreamed.
The watchman was dreaming that the Titanic was sinking, and he wanted to tell someone.
That's good. That's good writing.
Yeah.
Man, I gotta get that album. If you had any advice to give somebody who was just starting to unlock their own creativity, anything that helped you, or like a pivotal moment that kind of framed your creativity in a different way, like, or anything like that?
Well, I'm just lazy, so I think a walk, getting the body and the biorhythms and everything kind of moving, and walking is the essential human thing. I mean, you got your legs, you can do something. Lifting, yeah. Maybe. But, you know, I don't know. As musicians, you know, we all want to be healthy, too. So people do go to the gym. But, you know, in this town, in Nashville, it's so intense. If you're a writer in Nashville, that means you're writing all day long with other people. Yeah, so the gym is probably the best place for you after that. But if you're a solitary writer, you know, it's more of a leisurely, kind of like Taoist, Lao Tzu approach, kind of drifting, you know, and you don't panic because you're not writing. I think that's something for me that I get a little nervous if I'm not, you know, sometimes if I'm not writing, because we want to be on the boil. We want, you know, to feel our energy, right? You know. And then there's these doldrums and moody. Sometimes you got to just stay up all night and work on it. And it's your relationship at that point, you know. And that's not everybody understands that, you know. Yeah, I was just reading about Mike Seeger. He was so devoted to his art, you know, but he didn't write songs. He just learned all the old songs. Probably in his next life he'll come back as like a brilliant composer with all that stuff that he learned in his last lifetime. There's practical things, of course. Keep a notebook, write every day. Even if you don't know what you're trying to say, write it down. I think studies some classical poetry to see the breadth and scope of subject matter, but also the, you know, Edna, St. Vincent Millay, and Robert Frost, William Butler Yeats, John Keats. These are the people that they write in rhythm, you know. They're not trying to be abstract and subtle. They write in a rhythm, and the rhythm drives the words, and the poetry becomes musical. So I find that very helpful to, even in a diary, to write in a kind of maybe iambic pentameter verse form, 4 lines. Yeah, and learn how to make chai. Chai is a great writer's friend.
Find Vassar Clemens wherever he is. Well, this is great, man. Thanks for all your time and your great ways of saying all this stuff. How would you Bill Monroe was so creative. How could you characterize his creativity? Like,
the way I look at it now, I mean, he had all the symptoms. You know, a shoebox full of pieces of paper in the bus with names, titles, a shoebox. That was his file. No, I'll tell you the truth. Bill Monroe was listening. He always listened. He listened to how other people interpreted sound. He listened really carefully. And then he let it all go. And he became a great source of energy for the world. But that man listened. He listened from the time he was a little boy, you know. And there's a story about Bill as a cross-eyed boy hiding under the porch. And he told me that story, and he told John Hartford that story. Well, think about it. How long did he stay under the porch, being a cross-eyed boy, afraid of people looking at him and laughing? Well, he couldn't see well, and he's under the porch, and what's he hearing? He's hearing people's footsteps up above him on the porch. You know, I mean, if that stayed with Bill Monroe through his whole life, that memory, well, how many times did it happen? You know? And I remember working with him, he always told me, watch the dancer's feet. We once rode on a hay wagon through the streets of New York City, drawn by a horse, playing music, sitting on this, there's pictures, we're all sitting on these hay bales. We're advertising the Carnegie Hall Folk Music Festival, which would also have us, the Stanley Brothers, and Muddy Waters. You know, that's when Ralph Rinsler was alive, the great collector of energies for folk music and bluegrass and Cajun music, every kind of music. And Ralph inspired me. You know, he in fact kind of set me up to work with Bill Monroe through Bill Keith. And we're riding along on that hay wagon, clip-clop through the streets of New York City, and Bill is nudging me. He's going, play to the horse's feet. Play to the horse's feet. So we played those fiddle tunes, and Bill was happy. He didn't feel like that was any kind of dubious adventure, you know, like lip syncing or something. It was, you look at the pictures of him, he's so proud of us. Gene Lowinger, me, Don Lineberger, I think, maybe the band hadn't changed. It was still the first phase of when I had joined. The spring of '65, maybe. The year of the first Bluegrass Festival. And there's Bill Monroe, and he's going, play to the horse's feet, Pete. Play to the horse's rhythm. Yeah. So he was always listening.
And in symbiosis with
engaging with the rhythms he found around him.
That's like, what a powerful tool. Like, you don't have to like make it out of thin air. It's like it's right there with you. You just use it. It's like some of these. It's almost like the formula of the blues. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. Where do you feel like your creativity is leading you these days, right now? What's over the horizon?
Well, I feel kind of relieved that I've written and recorded most of this new album. And so I'm contemplating the future as a vast, wide-open canvas. And the first thing I'm going to do, and literally, is I'm going to mix this color that I've been thinking of, and I'm going to drip it on a piece of canvas. I like working visually. Another tool for artists. If people learn to draw, you know, I mean, it's a commitment because people do make their living, or used to, as artists, drawing and painting. Now everything's sort of digital, but, you know, to engage the hand in some Chinese brush calligraphy, to, you know, to work in a way that engages your body and your mind in something so simple as deceptively simple as a drawing or a calligraphy. I like to do that. I find it's a good balance. And when it's not happening, it's not happening. But when it's happening, it's a passion. So I'm imagining this color that I'm not going to paint it. I'm going to pour it. That's going to be my next thing. I'm going to pour this color, this sort of greenish black sort of. I've got to be able to mix the color. I've got some pigments and things that can mix it with oil, maybe a little turpentine. And I've always found that to be fascinating, that the colors that you make paint out of exist all around us. But we have to dig into the earth to find the minerals that combined with a medium like oil or a gel or some acrylic gel, plastic, wax. That's fascinating to me because it's alchemy. You know, and then you go back and pick up the instrument, which is, it's all together. Right? You just give it a little tune up and it's all complete. You know, whereas visually you can take it down to like components and work from scratch.
That is interesting. You just can't go to the leaf and take the green. You got to really.
You can't. You can try. Mash it up on the paper and stuff.
Right.
It's fun. I used to collect dirt, actually, sand. I have sand from in the land of the Navajo. I have land of the Navajo sand. It's pink, and it turns kind of brown when you start mixing and adding it on to the paper. I have some beautiful rock sand from Colorado. Has mica in it. It's very, very red, and it'll destroy your brushes if you use it because it's so rough. You know, but like Willie Matthews, the great artist who does all the Telluride posters, he goes, "Pete, you're trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to draw a hand." So yeah, you know, better to keep it simple and just keep trying to draw the hand. But it is fascinating, you know. And then you think of the components of like a guitar or a banjo. You know, a skin, originally gut strings from the guts of an animal strung over a wooden frame just to make a sound.
It's pretty doggone creative.
Humans have to do it.
That's it. Any final thoughts on any of this? What it all means, or 2012?
Well, you know, our lives are short, and I think music and the pursuit of the ineffable sounds, you know, can kind of, well, for sure, connect us with something beyond our idea of ourselves. Maybe prolong our lives, maybe heal people, you know. I'm always amazed that people, you know, come up after a performance and say, that was so good, you know, that made me feel good. And I'm thinking, wow, if people can feel good from something I'm doing, you know, that gives me inspiration to go deeper and kind of keep it going.
Yeah. P. Rowan, 2012.